Hi everyone. I am finally, I think, getting my video camera process to work correctly. So this is my first instructional video for you. The assignment that you're working on this week that's probably a little stressful is building a word web for the space essay. So I'm going to try and talk you through that process just so that you know what it would look like. And please give me feedback. Let me know, is this type of video helpful? What other things can I try and do to make learning a little bit easier for you? So the first thing that I'm going to start with is just walking through what is the web structure that you're going to be working with for this type of essay. So I'm putting a blank piece of paper on here. And this essay, just like all other essays, you're going to start with a red idea. The one thing that's different with this red idea is that you want to make sure that you reference the type of story, the name of the story, and the author before you get to the theme. And so what that red idea would look like is something like this. And then right here you list whatever the type of the story is. And a type could mean poem, short story, novel, whatever it is that you're trying to write about. And then you would give the title. So I'm going to do another box that would have the title. In this case, all the stories that you guys read for this assignment are short stories. So what you would write is in the short story, and then give the title of the short story, by, and then you give the name of the author. So same thing, you would want to look at your source that you're using, write the name of the author. Then you follow this with a comma because this is serving as your entire introductory clause. Now you're ready to write out your theme. So I'm going to say write theme here. So just keep in mind that in this particular essay, you can't just throw your theme out like fear is a powerful motivator, because your reader has no context for what you're talking about. So you want to make sure that you introduce the type of the story, the title of the story, the author, then you write your theme. And I'll show you some examples of that here in a minute. Next layer, this is just going to be a 5-paragraph essay. So at the blue level, you're coming up with 3 situations in the story where you think this theme is showing up. And so I would just space out my blue around. So I'm just going to do B's for this example so that you can see what the layout would look like. So I have all my blue ideas written out. And then think about your blue ideas and consider what order are you going to want to talk about them in, because remember, you need transitions on blue. So if this is my first blue, I might write the transition first on it. Then maybe I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to write next, comma. And then on the end one, I might write finally. Make sure that you add the commas on the lines also, so that when you get ready to type your essay, your brain remembers, oh, I need to have these transition phrases at the beginning of my blue sentences. Now, because all of the stories that you read, and we had 4 different options that you could have read. So if you were reading and annotating with me, you probably did A Walk in the Dark. If you were reading Space Story on your own and annotating on your own, you probably did Living Space. If you chose to do the textbook story, you did a story called The Storyteller. And then a 4th option that some of my students had, especially if they were traveling or gone for days, was the short story, The Ransom of Red Chief. So those are the 4 variations of this assignment that you could have. And I'm going to show you at least one example of all of those papers. But the layout for the web is exactly the same. So because they're made up stories, at the next level out, I'm not going to have 4 greens. Remember, we use purple for made up information. So I'm going to go back to the story and say, okay, here's a situation. Maybe let's start with the first. Here's a situation where I see this theme in action with this topic. Now I have to find 2 pieces of information from the text that show that. So 2 quotes or a quote and a paraphrase. In this type of essay, it's more accepted to use quotes. So you can use quotes for all 4 of them. So I would branch off, and if I'm going to write out my quote, I would find my quote and I'd write it out like this. So this is what my purple idea is going to look like. It'll be a quote, and then I'll circle it. Now, because this is coming exactly from the source, remember, I need to write on that purple line where it came from. So I would do the author's last name, and then I would have like a number. So this would be whatever the last name is in page 17. Then my follow-up sentence, because remember, on a critical essay, we don't have ideas that float on their own. You have the quote, and then you have the follow-up, which is a green idea. So I'm going to match this up with a green sentence that would be something like this shows, and then I would explain what I think that piece of evidence is showing. So I would write out my this shows sentence. So now these 2 ideas are going to stay together. I'm always going to write the purple first and then the green second. And so I'm going to shade this area right in between so that they stay together. Hopefully that sounds familiar on the essays that I've walked you through so far. So we're going to repeat that process for all the blues. So here's my next purple. I'm going to make sure that I write the last name and I write a page number down on the line. And then I'm going to have the green that goes with it. And I'm going to shade the space in between. I'm just doing this very quickly because I don't want to make the video too long for you. But the same process holds for all of them. I find my quote and I have my last name. I have my page number. And then I put my green idea in. That's my follow-up. So this could be this proves. And then I would finish writing out whatever I think that purple idea proves. Okay, so I'm going to find another purple idea, which is going to be a quote. I'm going to write the last name on the line and the page number on the line, and then my follow-up green. And shade the space in between. And then I've got my last bubble that I'm doing exactly the same thing for. So I have my quote. I have the author's last name on the line. And then I'm going to follow it up with my green and shade so I know that those two ideas are stuck together now. And then I'm on my last quote. And my last green idea. Okay, so remember that you do need author names on the purple lines because the purple lines are what's coming from your source. You don't need names on the green lines because the green lines are your own ideas where you're writing out this shows, this proves. So this is what my entire web would look like. You're writing a 5-paragraph essay. So this is the 5-paragraph essay format. So now let me show you a couple of examples. I'm not giving you entire essays, mostly because I don't want you to just copy me. I want you to do some of your original thinking, but I am going to try and give you a starter point. So if you want ideas for themes, if you look at this assignment in the Power School Learning, I have a table that's in the instructions that gives you 4 different possible themes for each story. So feel free to use my themes or the ones that I'm going to show you on this video. But remember, you can choose your own themes also. And if you want to ask me if your theme works or if your blues work with it, feel free to log into my digital classroom and ask or email me. Either works. So the first one that I'm going to show you is the starting web for A Walk in the Dark, because that's the one story that most of you are doing. So here's an example of what a web would look like for A Walk in the Dark. So the red idea here is, in the short story A Walk in the Dark by Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Armstrong is controlled by fear. And that's a pretty basic theme for this story. So I went ahead and I wrote out 3 blues for you. So if you need to pause the video and write down those blues, if that's what you want to go with, you can certainly do that. I have my transitions on the line so I know what order I'm going to write these in. And then I start looking at the story. So keep in mind, in total, I have 6 purple ideas. So I'm going to need 6 quotes, 6 sentences from the story that help prove my point. I only have one of these written out all the way for you to see, but here's what that blue-green-purple set would look like. Armstrong is afraid of running out of time. So now I have my quote. It was no use then regretting the lateness of his departure, which obviously speaks about time. My interpretation to go with that is, this shows Armstrong is very aware his time was being cut short. And I may actually need to explain that a little more. You could add 2 sentences if you have to for the green when you're typing. Even if you have your web kind of lined out, as you type, you're probably going to discover you need to write a little bit more or it's not going to make sense. So there's an example of a blue, purple, green set. And then I would have the other purple, green pair. So I've got my purple, green that go with this blue idea. Here's my next blue idea. So same thing, I'm going to have a quote and then this suggests, or a quote and this shows. And here's my last blue idea. And I have my quote, this proves, my quote, this is evidence of. That's what completes the web. So again, if you need to pause because you're doing this essay and you want an example of the red and the blues, here's an example of the red and the blue ideas for you. Next thing that I want to throw in is I also have some of you who really aren't appreciating the web layout anymore because you've adjusted so well to note cards. And note cards really are how we write essays as you get into high school and college. So for a note card format, for this particular essay, you'd start with the red idea, just like you do with the web. So an example of a red idea would look like this. I'm going to zoom this down for a second. So here's another red idea. You would put your last name up in this corner. Because you're writing the note card. So here's a different theme. In the short story, A Walk in the Dark by Arthur C. Clarke, the power of darkness to intimidate humanity is apparent. And then I have it marked as a red idea, and it's an original idea because I came up with it. Now I would try and think of, are there 3 situations in the story where this theme shows up? And I think there probably are. So I'm going to zoom out my camera again. So there's my red idea, and now here are my 3 blues. So my first blue, I'm going to move this over so you can read it maybe over here, is next Armstrong. Oh, that's my next one. Sorry. First, Robert Armstrong struggles to travel effectively in the darkness. Then I have my next blue, and I have my finally blue. So I'm laying out a web just like I would if I were doing it on one piece of paper, but now it's on note cards. So I have all 3 of my note cards set up. And then when I go to do the purples, so I'm going to take one of these sets. So this one has to do with seeing. So Armstrong is worried that other creatures may not be as affected by the darkness as he is. So here are 2 problems that he had in the darkness. So here's a direct quote from the story. According to the old man at the camp, it was as if the thing that was following could see perfectly. So that shows something about how creatures are moving in the darkness. So I have that quote. And then here's my second quote. That's about the creature trapping him. So I have these written out just like I would if they were on a web. I have the author mentioned. I have the page number. There's my sentence. And notice that I did write an intro in here before I led into the quote. You can do that, or you can just list the quote like this one shows. Then the green sentence is going to appear on the back for both of these. So I have my this suggests, this shows. So now I have my web all laid out, and it would look that way for each blue-green set. I don't know if I can make this all fit on the camera, but I would start with my red idea at the top, and then I would have the blues. So I have each of my blues up here, and then under it I have the 2 purple cards that go with this one. I would have 2 purple cards that go with this one, and I would have 2 purple cards that go with this one. That's my web, and you may have to lay that on the floor and take a digital picture so that I can see that. If you do that, take actually 2 digital pictures because you're going to want to show me this web, and then flip over your purples, unless you put your greens on the bottom, and take a picture of it with the green side so that I know that you did the interpretation also. Then this is your web, and you're ready to start typing your paper. So that's what it looks like if you do this with note cards instead. So let's talk about the other 3 stories really quickly, and then hopefully this is enough information to get you started. So the next one I'm going to talk about is the storyteller. So if you read the storyteller, the one big, I guess, gap that you're going to see at this point is that you did not annotate. You answered questions instead. And so because you didn't annotate, you may not have thought about the story as much. And now, since it's a month later, you may have to reread it to make sure that you know what you're doing. But I have a red idea again. In the short story, The Storyteller, Saki argues the importance of sharing stories with moral lessons. And so in this story, you have a couple of different characters sharing stories with children, and then you can kind of see how the children react to those stories. So I have my 3 different blues, and again, if you need to pause because you want to steal my blues, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to adjust this a little bit more so they all fit in there. So I have my 3 blues that I'm ready to go with, and then I have 1 purple-green set lined out there so you can see how it works. So my blue here is the children's aunt is unable to answer their questions. So the quote that I found was, the aunt immediately got defensive at this unexpected attack. And then this shows the aunt is not prepared for questions because they identify her story's weakness. So I'm drawing some kind of conclusion about how the aunt's responding. So you would follow that same format and make sure that you have purple-green set for this blue, another purple-green set for that blue, your last purple-green set, and your final purple-green set. So I've got all of my bubbles that I need, and I'm ready to start writing. So that's what the storyteller kind of looks like, except I'm missing one of my purple-green sets if you didn't notice that. That would be up here. Sorry. I got so anxious working on my web, I didn't finish. So I would write the name on the line again, and then I would do my interpretation that goes with that. Okay, so that's an example of a theme for the storyteller, if that's the one that you're reading. Feel free to steal my ideas, or you can go back and look at the different themes that I offer in the instructions. Make up your own theme. Ask me if you need me to explain or check and see if I can help you find examples. So that's the storyteller. The next story that I had kids do was Ransom of Red Chief. So here's what Ransom of Red Chief might look like. So my red idea for this one, and again, pause if you need to. In the short story, The Ransom of Red Chief by O. Henry, adults are overwhelmed by a child's creative energy. So this might be a story that many of you may remember reading from 7th grade. It's usually a story that we read in middle school because it describes kind of playing pretend and the impact that that has on adults. So I have my 3 green ideas that talk about different ways that the boy in the story is playing pretend. And you could call him Red Chief if you want. That's the name that he goes by. And then I have a quote from the story. And this shows, and I'm explaining what it shows. So the kidnapped boy pretends to be a warrior. The boy shouts, "Do you dare enter the camp of Red Chief?" This shows the boy is acting like he is in charge of everything. So that would kind of show the evidence that he is being a warrior and taking control. Then I would find another quote, and this proves. I would go to my next blue idea, find a quote to write. This shows a quote to write. This is evidence of. Remember, you can rotate those beginner starters any way that you want to. And then here's the last one. For a blue idea, I've got the green that go with it. And that's what a web for Ransom of Red Chief would look like. And then I have one more story to show you. Hopefully this is refreshing your memory on what literature webs look like. So last story is this, Living Space. And this is by far the most complex story. So if you were confused about what was going on, that's okay. This is a really advanced story. Isaac Asimov wrote a lot of stories with a lot of historical messages, warnings for society, things he thought that developed countries should be worried about. And this story contains a ton of them. So you could choose a theme that's fairly obvious. So the theme that I picked had to do with math. Math shows up in the story over and over again. So in the short story Living Space by Isaac Asimov, humans in the future have blind faith in mathematical odds. So they're trusting that the math is going to keep them safe. And then by the end of the story, you find out the math is really flawed and they're not safe. So I have my 3 blues. Again, pause if you want to steal my blues and use those for your starting point. Hopefully you can read it from your computer. It looks pretty clear from mine. So I've got my 3 blue ideas. And then I'm going to find a quote. So I'm going to move this down a little so you can see the one I actually quoted. So one of my blue ideas is human faith in infinite Earths is flawed. So they base their whole society on the idea that there are innumerable Earths out there that they could colonize. So my quote is, according to Ching, who's one of the characters, the computer would never pick the same probability pattern twice. This suggests humans trust their computer to make settlement decisions, which might be dangerous because humans aren't making the decisions, the computer is. So there's an example of a blue, purple, green set for this essay. And again, you're following the same themes. Make sure you're writing the author's name on the line, the page number. Make sure that you have your transition phrases written on the blue lines. You're putting in quotes if you're doing a direct quote. You have the this proves, this is evidence of, this suggests, this shows, however you're rotating those ideas. And this is an example of what the web would look like for Living Space. Last thing that I'm going to talk about, I know my video is getting a little long, so I'm going to try and cut it short here. Once you have the webs done, you are ready to actually go to the template and start typing. And in this particular template, if you remember Mother and Manville that we did earlier in the year, you can type a whole lot of the ideas straight from your web. Remember that your red idea is going to show up over and over and over. Only in the first paragraph do you have to include all this beginning stuff about the short story, the name of the title, and the name of the author. When you rewrite this at your end paragraph, you don't have to mention all that again. You just stick with your theme. And in this case, I would be saying something about math and probability or odds for my theme because that's the theme that I'm connecting to. Your blue ideas are also going to have to be reworded. So remember, you're going to mention each of these blue in that intro paragraph and in the conclusion paragraph. So what I would probably recommend is rephrase it when you're writing the intro. So I'm not going to steal the text as it's written here. I'm going to try and come up with another way to reword it. So I might think of another word for infinite. I might think of a different word for flawed. I'm going to write those in the intro. And then when I go to do the body paragraphs, I can pretty much copy exactly from here. Keep in mind, the one thing that's different is that the quotes typically have to be introduced somehow. So you want an introductory clause in front of them, like according to Ching, or Ching described, Ching shouted. Think of all those verbs that I had you put at the beginning to kind of lead into the quote so that it makes sense. When you go to the template, which is found in your Google Drive in your language arts folder. So if you are in any class but 7th period, it should be in your second language arts folder. If you're in 7th period, for some reason, it put it in the first language arts folder. So the same one that all your first semester stuff was in. But find the template. It's called Space Essay Template, or Space Essay, I think is just it. open it and you'll see it's already set up. It's color coded. It's a 5-paragraph essay. You have your intro paragraph, which is red, blue, blue, blue. Then you have your body paragraphs. Each body paragraph would end up being blue, purple, green, purple, green. And then your conclusion paragraph is back to red, blue, 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 and red. So at the end, I'm going to have some big statement to say about math and why we should or shouldn't use it to keep our society going. And that, in a nutshell, is... I don't have my title slide anymore. I lost it. See, I knew disorganization would find me. That is how you create a web for a space essay. Hopefully this video helped you. Give me some feedback. Let me know. I'm sorry I talk a lot, but sometimes English stuff is a little complicated. And I will try and give you as many tips and help as I can. Let me know how things are going and what you need help with. Thanks. Bye.